And you know what, ladies, thank you for being patient. Jazakumullah khairan. You ladies are really patient. Sometimes I get in a lot of details that sometimes a little off track, or maybe too off track. Okay, here we go. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, we left off at وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَأَخْرَجْنَا بِهِ نَبَاتَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ فأخرجنا منه خضرا نخرج منه حبا متراكبا ومن النخل من طلعها قنوان دانية وجنات من أعناب والزيتون والرمان مشتبها وغير متشابه انظروا إلى ثمره إذا أثمر وينعي إن في ذلكم لآيات لقوم يؤمنون. All right, to translate this one, and after this piece, or at least this portion of that ayah, let's really go back. وهو الذي أنشأكم من نفس واحدة فمستقر ومستودع. And he's the one that created you from one soul. فمستقر ومستودع. And we said that the majority of the scholars had actually said in regards to mustaqar that it is a place of stability, a place of protection, but mustawda, a place of storage. And we said majority, in fact, 90% of the mufassirin had actually said il-mustaqar is the womb and il-mustawda is the grave. And that's 90% of the mufassirin. But, I don't know. I personally feel more comfortable with the 10% of the mufassirin that actually went farther and said mustaqar is life on earth and mustawda is basically all the different resources that were there on earth. Of course, using the word resources or using, these are more modern terms than the terms that the mufassirin at that time and what they used to use. They didn't use these type of pragmatic terms. They were more as literary words and not like today. Today, I would say the Western influence in academia in separating between literature and the type of eloquence that you might use from perhaps the pragmatic way of describing things is what led to the modern type of terms and the different terminologies that we might use. So when we look at, for example, mustaqar or mustawda, they didn't used to use the word resources. Okay, they didn't used to use the resources. So that's why you would say even in the modern Arabic language, they'll use the same type of translated terms that you would actually find in the modern English in what terms they would use today. And I'm sure the same is in Urdu. I'm sure the same is probably in other languages. And I recently learned that's not the same in Chinese and Japanese, that they were really strict in how they adopt the different terminologies and the different words that are coming from the West in order to preserve their identity, to preserve their autonomy, whatever it is. But I think the Arabic culture, the Arabic modern culture actually failed in doing that. I don't know much about the Pakistani, but something really interesting to actually see how sometimes we adopted the mindset of a Western modern mindset in trying to be really pragmatic in how we see things and how we even interpret and the terminologies that we might use in order to explain different things. Okay, let me talk about فَمُسْتَقَرُّ وَمُسْتَوْدَعُ right here. Why did I like, even though only 10%, if not even less of the mufassirin use mustaqar as being on earth? Because when you look at أَنْشَأَكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ, let me first give you both opinions. the 90% of the scholars that said أنشأكم من نفس واحدة, they said, well, this was talking about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created you from one soul, that is Adam alayhi salam, and therefore going into the chronology of this, mustaqar, meaning you were then dwelling in the womb, as in the ayah in surah al-Mursalat, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking about that our life, and then there would be this mustaqar, and also that istiqrar basically was referring to the womb. Okay, al-mustawda, they considered that, hey, since this was talking about ansha'akum, then telling us, well, the chronology is that yes, you were created in the early stage in your creation historically, that is from one soul, that is Adam alayhi salam, and then basically your reproduction happens in the womb, and then finally you've got a final destination, which is the grave. Okay, قد فصلنا الآيات. The 10% of the mufassirin, they said, well, here it was telling us أنشأكم من نفس واحدة, created you from one soul, and then mustaqar, which is on earth, and mustawda, to give us the resources on earth. And what's their evidence? They said, when the ayah continues to tell us قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَةِ, we had given you all the different detailed evidences, all the different resources for you to understand, and then to explain these details, it then continues to say, okay, here are the details. So you want to know how it was mustaqar and how this was a restored provision for you. Well, here's how here's how you can interpret it, here's how you can understand it. So therefore, he is the one that sent down the water from the skies, basically, and then got or derived from that water plants of all different various kinds, and from these plants you basically had extracted greenery that basically has its own seeds, and they would be piled up and basically, you know, accumulated. And from the different palm trees you would see whether it's pollen, or you would see different types of trees that might have one branch, basically. Well, not one branch, that would be we'll show it to you, but basically different kinds of palm trees, and different gardens of grape trees, and olives, and pomegranates, and some that are similar and some that is not similar, and see how it produces the different plants, and when it basically is the time for harvesting those plants. For in that there are signs for people that believe. So the other opinion that said, well, this mustawda is telling us about the storage, and they said, here's our evidence to that. They said, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us that there was a storage of water. That's number one. The storage of water was to bring the first kind of provision, the first kind of rizq. Then the second storage, that it said, well, فَأَخْرَجْنَا نَبَاتَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. So here we go. The storage of water brings in the storage of plants, and the storage of plants, and that's why it said فَأَخْرَجْنَا مِنْهُ أَخْرَجْنَا مِنْهُ. It was telling us, well, you see how there's something that comes out of it? That's that storage. That's that mustawda. Then therefore it was telling you that there is stored provision, whether in the skies, or whether in the earth itself, or whether inside different plants, or whether inside different seeds, or whether outside of those palm trees, or perhaps the different types of trees, or perhaps even the different types of plants, whether we're speaking about grapes, we're talking about olives, we're talking about pomegranates, and that they would be different types in different ways. And therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was then redirecting our vision from seeing how it's mustawda to seeing that this was actually created for a purpose, in order to direct your energy, your your energy towards the purpose that you were created for. So that's why it said لِقَوْمِ يُؤْمِنُونَ. Well, what is the purpose that I was created for? That's why the ayah then continues to give us the purpose that you were created for was to basically embrace tawheed, to embrace the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to embrace the submission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why it goes وَجَعَلُوا لِلَّهِ شُرَكَاءَ الْجِنَّ وَخَلَقَهُم. And they, who's they? What is this referring to? Well, it was referring to the pagan Arab and even other religions. But here's one thing. It's always important to remember that the Quran doesn't just tackle paganism, but it tackles the different types of faiths out there. And you want to remember that when you speak about other types of faith, they may actually appear as if it's a completely different faith, but the concept in many situations is actually the same. If you were to take to at least look into different faiths, you've got certain faiths that are monotheistic faiths, to talk about Christianity, talk about Judaism, talk about Baha'i, talk about just different faiths, where they may actually have, let's say, at least a revelation that they would turn to. And you got the second type of faiths that are basically considered the pagan faiths. Pagan faiths, they come with the same concept. The concept is that God basically dwells, or God is a spirit that may become a part of something, whether we're speaking about a part of a human being or a part of something materialistic thing that you see out around you. So whether we're speaking about a part of a tree, a part of a mouse, a part of a cow, a part of probably a human being, Jesus, or a part of, so that's what would get into the pagan religion. Okay. And you've got the third kind of religions are basically the atheistic religions. They don't believe in God, but they would believe in a type of embracing a certain culture, a certain type of an embracement with nature, or things in nature, or things with probably the ancestors. Just like when we're talking about Confucianism, we're talking about Taoism, we're talking about those religions. They're atheistic religions, or even Buddhism, atheistic religions, but it's embracing our ancestors, or embracing their teachings, or etc. And then we would consider that. So when you look at the Quran, it may tackle this faith at one time, or that faith another time, or the concept itself. So we cannot consider that the dialogues or the debates that the Quran debates with the other faiths as outdated, because when you look at religions, they basically fall within these categories. It's a pagan religion, it's a monotheistic religion, or it's an atheistic religion. The idea is the same. So a lot of those other religions, let's say that most of the religions actually fell in what is actually called Gnosticism. This is extremely important to keep in mind, because even some Muslims had fallen in that. What is that? That's not agnosticism, but it's Gnosticism. What is that? It's considering that God's knowledge, or at least God's spirit, falls within someone or something, and therefore that someone or something becomes as holy as God, or having the spirit of God. Okay, so that's Gnosticism, whether we're speaking about knowledge or whether we're speaking about power, etc. And that's basically the core and the definition of shirk. Okay, just keep that one in mind. This is the definition of shirk. And even today, we would say in certain Muslim sects, we would see certain Muslims believing this sheikh is related directly to Allah, or whatever it is, and basically having some superpowers, or having, let's say, holy powers, or blessed powers, or whatever, and therefore falling in shirk by giving basically a different label, but the shirk is really the same. So it's really important to study the definition in order not to think of the narratives, because shaitan basically gives every single religious group a different narrative, a different way of describing things to appear as if it's a new thing. You really need to study these definitions to learn that not to get carried away with the different terminologies that are used, because it's actually the same, but presented in a new packaging. Just keep that one in mind. Presented in a new packaging, but the ingredients are really the same. Just because they used a new word for it, it doesn't make it different. It just is a new packaging. And this is what happens even today when you look at atheism, when you look at the Western culture, you look at liberalism, you look at feminism, postmodernism, atheism, you look at all communism, whatever it is, it's not unprecedented. It's just a new packaging. That's it. Just keep that in mind. A new packaging. Okay. So when you look at وَجَعَلُوا لِلَّهِ شُرَكَاءَ الْجِنَّ وَخَلَقَهُم, they had associated partners with the jinn, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala associated partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As what are those partners? They considered the jinn. وَخَلَقَهُم, and the Lord Almighty had created them. وَخَرَقُوا لَهُ بَنِينَ وَبَنَاتٍ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. What is the word خَرَقُوا? خَرَقُوا means they had derived and they had claimed and attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sons and daughters with no knowledge. Meaning, is there any way that this can be done with knowledge? Well, that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us that they did not have the credible resources, and they basically had invented a religion or invented an interpretation from their own selves, and then they basically presented it as this is something that is based on knowledge, something that is based on inspiration, and the list goes on and on. Now, this is extremely important to mention, that a lot of the different things that are within the society presented to you, I want you to emphasize on the word بِغَيْرِ عِلْم. A lot of that is presented to you, whether it's given to you as it's an inspiration, or whether it's given to you as information, or whether it's research or whatever it is. This is important to keep in mind, that just because the labeling is basically given to you to make it seem inspiring, to make it seem credible, it does not make it so. Islam is always telling us to be critical in the way we would look at the information, or at least the interpretation and certainly the narrative that is brought to us. Islam wants us to be critical in how we get this information, in how we see this being passed on to us, whether through culture, whether through education, whether through, just indoctrination, whatever it is. Islam is teaching us, I want you to be critical. Just because they will tell you and present it like it was an inspiration, giving a different narrative, it does not make it as credible, resourced information. It does not make it true. Subhanahu wa ta'ala amma yasifun. There's none like unto the Lord Almighty, for he is the most high and beyond all that they are describing. And this is very important to go back to Surah Al-Najm, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِيَّتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّن رَّبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. We always go back to this one in order to pretty much break down the different information, the different resources, the different narratives that we would look at it. Is this based on dhann? Is this based on speculation? Is this based on their own interpretation? And this mainly is in things like sociology and things like maybe ethics as well, and things like psychology and things like humanities. A lot of those different interpretations are actually backed up by certain political groups, their different philosophical groups, whatever it is, and then it becomes as presented, I would say, in a label that this is what is backed up by knowledge. This is what is backed up by research. This is it. If, as a Muslim, you see things based on the lens of Quran and Sunnah, then you would know that يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ, if it is opposing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent in revelation, or what the Prophet ﷺ had taught in his teachings, then you would know how to be critical in your vision, and you would know that they are following speculation and not necessarily what the reality is. They're making their own interpretation. إِلَّا الظَّنُّ وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ. So what's the difference between a dhann wa ma tahwa al-anfus in determining if we're talking about ethics, we're talking about perhaps morality, etc., or we're talking about understanding about God? When we're speaking about dhann, in terms of ethics, for example, they're looking at maximizing a certain benefit. But if the person does not have the complete vision of what benefit what is the goal? What is the benefit that we're trying to get to? In other words, they lack data in what benefit and what are we trying to maximize here? Okay, that's number one. So when you look at the dhann, they're trying to maximize a certain benefit. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why He is Al-Hakim, Al-Khabir. So we consider Sharia as basically the way to help us maximize the good and maximize the best benefit and interest for the society and even for the individual. Versus when you look at يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ. وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ is focused on maximizing, let's call it entertainment, maximizing pleasure, okay? But Islam tells you that no, just because you would get pleasure probably maximized, or that doesn't necessarily make it good. In fact, we see it even in nature that some of what maximizes pleasure is in fact harmful to you. So therefore, Islam puts in these two categories, one, interest, two, pleasure, and does not consider that pleasure is necessarily supposed to be immediate, but pleasure is also taking consideration that sometimes you need to delay that pleasure in order to get the best pleasure. And sometimes in order to get that pleasure and to get, let's say, the interest, sometimes you have to go through certain hardships. And this hardship is basically going to delay perhaps an evil thing or certain pain. So in other words, we see pain and put that within perspective to bring about the maximizing the interest, maximizing the benefit, and at the same time maximizing pleasure, but it's not to look at it from the perspective of immediate pleasure, but it is to maximize pleasure, whether in Jannah or whether in dunya. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّن رَبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. And the Lord Almighty had sent guidance to them in order to help them see things based on the bigger picture and even the narrowed down picture. In other words, see it from both lenses. بَدِيعُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, for He is the one that is al-Badi'. What is al-Badi'? Al-Badi' is basically the one that not only created things in precision, but also put in the beauty. In other words, we're talking about beauty in the design itself and how precise it is, but we're also talking about that it considers appearance, it considers aesthetics, it considers maximizing good, maximizing pleasure, maximizing benefit, and that's al-ibda'. That is al-ibda'. Considering maximizing everything good for you, that's basically in the earth, in the heavens, and on the earth. In other words, connecting it to this one. How is it mustaqar and how is it mustawda'? This is actually a key word within these ayat, al-mustaqar and al-mustawda'. Because if you were to look at these two words, they're actually repeated in the Quran often, al-mustaqar and al-mustawda'. how things are a place of al-qarar, how things are a place for one, dwelling, because when you're looking at mustaqar or mustaqir in the other ayah, it's to let you know that on earth, in the goal of Sharia and the goal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation in things in nature is to bring about the resources for dwelling, the resources for stability. Il-mustawda is to tell you that there is an abundance in the resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put to help you bring about this dwelling. You just have to put in the pieces together in order to maximize, one, the interest and the benefit, and two, maximize the ability to basically get the pleasure. But that is not to get the pleasure as a goal. That pleasure is the goal of what you're getting to, but it's basically to get you into ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ. For that is your Lord Almighty. There's no other Lord to worship. But I want you to look at this one, رَبُّكُم. What is a Rabb? And why didn't say ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ إِلَهَكُم, for example? Because a Rabb is the one to be your Lord, to give you the cherishment, to give you all the different necessary resources to help you dwell. Because we're talking about right there, mustaqar and mustawda. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting you know that these resources that you were given are not just resources to maximizing your pleasure or maximizing your resources for no purpose, but the purpose is ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ. He's given you all those resources. What for? خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. He's the creator of everything, and therefore فَاعْبُدُوهُ. So therefore, worship your Lord Almighty. And of course, it is part of your instinct that you are looking for mustaqar, that you're looking for stability, you're looking for this type of dwelling where you have the resources, two, you've got the different tools to maximize the good, to maximize the pleasure, etc. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, though, in those moments where you may be lacking, just know وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ وَكِيلٌ. The Lord Almighty is controlling all the different things around you. So you depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and don't necessarily think of yourself as the power to make the energy to maximize the good or to maximize the pleasure. That's why the Muslim mindset is basically letting us redirect our vision from seeing it's our efforts that maximize the good or maximize the pleasure, that it's not you, that it's basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put in terms of earth, or in terms of the resources, or in terms of the skies, or in terms of your body. So therefore, you would turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even when things fail. What do we mean by when things fail? When things fail, perhaps you put in the energy, but then the crops didn't go. You put in the energy to study, but you didn't pass the test. You put in the energy to probably get married or whatever it is, the marriage didn't work out. All of these different things, you might have invested in the energy, but things didn't work out. Then therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, don't necessarily beat your back or consider yourself as a failure, because you would redirect your vision from seeing that you control the forces on earth to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controlling the forces on earth, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controlling the means, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controlling everything, and therefore وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ وَكِيلٌ. What does that mean? وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْء, or is that, or if it's everything supposed to be dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's actually both ways. وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ وَكِيلٌ, that the Lord Almighty Himself is actually the direct force in how things function. That's number one. Number two, everything else in terms of matter, it doesn't just go matter in motion, but the one to control the motion is basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one to control the energy is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To believe otherwise is basically shirk or kufr, depending on what alternative interpretation this person had basically put in. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then continues, لا تدركه الأبصار وهو يدرك الأبصار. Now, this goes in the same paradigm that we would see in Surah Ash-Shura, فاطر السماوات والأرض, and then جعل لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا ومن الأنعام أزواجا يذرأكم فيه ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. The same way in Surah Ash-Shura, we had done those ayat before. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, He's the creator of the heavens and the earth, and that He had created everything in the law of binary, male, female, but ليس كمثله شيء. Nothing's like unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He does not fit within the laws that He had put in nature, the laws of being binary or probably energy or whatever it is. That does not apply unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because not only did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create matter, but He also created the laws of motion. The laws of motion, the laws of energy, all of that, that's also a creature. That's why you look at death and life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ الْمُلْكُ وَهُوَ الَّذِي تبارك الذي بيده وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم. He created life and death. Wait a minute. Death is a creature? Yes, death is a creature. Why? That's in order to tell us that the different forces / motion that you would see around you, that's basically part of creation that you cannot apply on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تدركه الأبصار. Your sight is not capable of envisioning or even understanding or even be able to fathom what it means to have a magnificent Lord, what it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself as an entity is al-Azim, is al-Kabir, is al-Mut'al, etc. You may not fully understand that, but the Lord Almighty, yudrikul abasar. What is al-idrak? Al-idrak is really to comprehend something. Okay? And when we speak about yudrikul absar, it could also mean to encompass. So your vision, your eyes, your ability to see is not capable of having an full encompassment in understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as an entity. But the Lord Almighty fully encompasses what you see. In other words, when you are looking at an item, you're looking at something, you actually see through the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, yes, you're looking at something, but if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give you that power, you would not have been capable of seeing it. So how do we understand all of this? Well, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, you're not going to be capable of fully comprehending what that fully means. But just understand, وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. What is al-Latif? Al-Latif comes from the root la-tu-fa or la-ta-fa. What does that mean? La-ta-fa actually means to do something that is subtle. Not noticeable, not seen, not recognized, but it's there. La ta'fa. Something you didn't recognize. Something happened, but you didn't even recognize what happened. And then you just focus on the outcome and don't realize that there was a certain power, energy, force that was put in making this happen. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that the different things that happen around you are basically from al-Latif, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power is there, but you don't really recognize it because it is simply something that happens in a way that does not necessarily shake the things around it, and it just happened when you did not recognize how and where this, of course, to you, the data was not showing that the people in Gaza were going to be in victory whatsoever. You didn't see that. All the information, all the data is showing that these people are going to get eliminated. These people are going to get killed. And to speak about victory is really to speak about in the dunya terms, is really to speak about something that is mission impossible. 3,000 or maybe even less, or maybe a little bit more, with very simple ammunitions and very simple tools, and simply facing facing a superpower, because Israel is backed up by the US, facing the most sophisticated weaponry. And you're talking about people that really don't even have food and water to even just survive. They're going to be facing this superpower? How's that even making sense? When you look at the data, we would say yes, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Latif and is al-Khabir. You never know. The data seems like, yeah, it is not in their favor, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that He is al-Latif, even when things don't look that it is in your favor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking you to do one thing, is recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically the one to control the different odds, is to control the different things and how and what direction they basically go into, the different motion, etc. And that's the same thing, whether we're speaking about political situation, individual, your health, whatever it is, you would recognize that you redirect your vision and see that victory is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that success is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that happiness coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whatever motion, whatever trajectory is basically coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you just need to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us that all the different things don't happen based on what investment and force you put in, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still asking you to put in the investment. He's asking you, I need you. I want you to put in the effort and study how plants grow, or study to basically pass the test and put in the different tools, or even if we're talking about war, prepare all the different ammunitions and the different, military empowerment that you can. And it's all, in other words, study all that data. That's your duty. But then the rest is left onto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's telling you, you need to do your homework, and the rest is on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ بَصَائِرُ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ. You just received all those different basa'ir. What is basa'ir anyways? Well, the word basara actually means to see. Basara, to see. To see with your own eyes? Yes. But al-basira is to see with your heart. Okay? There's a difference. Al-basar is to see with your own vision, with your own sight. But al-basira is to see with your heart. So when it said, قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ بَصَائِرُ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ, in other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you insights which you would be capable to see through an open heart from your Lord Almighty. فَمَنْ أَبْصَرَ فَلِنَفْسِهِ. Whoever had basically seen this insight was capable of looking beyond the surface and had an open heart to see things, well, that's basically coming as a benefit for that person. وَمَنْ عَمِيَ فَعَلَيْهَا. Then whoever in whoever had chosen to be blinded, well, then that's going to be their responsibility. فعليها, meaning they will be held accountable for choosing to turn a blind eye. But here's a question. I don't control what I see. How is it that's possible? How do we actually control how we see? It's not like I chose to see things that way. Well, that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. Okay, well, I want you to look at continue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, وَمَا أَنَا عَلَيْكُمْ بِحَفِيظ. That is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's not responsible for what choices you had made, and not responsible for the insight or your closed heart or whatever. And that's why he said, وَكَذَلِكَ نُصَرِّفُ الْآيَاتِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, نُصَرِّفُ الْآيَاتِ, he basically gives you the details, and in order to basically get into recognizing these ayat, yeah, they will tell you, oh Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they will tell you that you had made this up. They will tell you that somehow you studied this elsewhere. In other words, you plagiarized all of this information from somewhere else. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, we're going to clarify it for those that have critical thinking, for those that learn, for those that want to make a claim and back it up with certain information. And here's the backed up information and backed up data that we will give you. اتبع ما أوحي إليك من ربك. Follow. How do you get into having that basira? Well, here's one tip number one. اتبع ما أوحي إليك من ربك. Follow what was delivered unto you from your Lord Almighty. This is the first one. In other words, when you follow your own whims and desires, that's basically going to have a result onto basically affecting your ability to see things with your heart, because your body, the second you get your body so hooked on to searching for desires and you're just feeding all those desires, then your ability to look at the value, to look at the meanings of things is basically going to be disrupted. Because the second that you're just letting your body focus on a certain type of search, a certain type of thirst, a certain type of hunger, then you're just going to let your body basically control you and what you're in search for. You're going to let your body control what you are in need for. But if the second that you learn how to control what your body is wanting to push you into, and that's why we would do the fasting as a way of spirituality. Why? Because we're teaching and training the body how to control its desires and control us and our focus and our brain focus, and let us look into within, look into the heart. La ilaha illahu. How do we get to that? Well, you need to اتبع ما أوحي إليك. Follow the revelation from the Lord, your Lord Almighty. There's no God but the Lord Almighty. That's the conclusion that you're going to get to once you suppress a part of your desires and you let it go within a certain amount of stability, and rather than it controlling you. So how do I relate to all the society around me? He said, أعرض عن المشركين. There's a certain point that you have to turn away. You have to basically separate yourself and let that be. What is that? Well, basically what was revealed onto you from your Lord Almighty, which is al-Wahi, and let that be what's influencing your mind, your body, and that's basically coming in as a combination of culture, a combination of vision, a combination of identity. Your identity is basically one, your vision, the ideology that you carry, and 2, the culture that you practice, the behavior that you practice on ground. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us those resources in order to be critical in our thinking, critical in how we get influenced by the society around us, and tells us, well, one, you have to follow the resource and make sure you're following your resources, meaning al-wahi, right? Because unless you would follow that, you're going to see yourself not realizing that you're actually being indoctrinated / influenced without you realizing. You're going to think that it's your own thought and that you are free thinking. But the truth of the matter is that you carry a lot of those visions that are really as an influence from the society. ولو شاء الله ما أشركوا وما جعلناك عليهم حفيظا وما أنت عليهم بوكيل. Even you, O Muhammad, just recognize, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want them to commit shirk, He would have actually controlled their hearts to believing in one thing. In other words, He would not have given them free will. But just know, وَمَا جَعَلْنَاكَ عَلَيْهِمْ حَفِيظًا. You're not responsible for what choices they make. And وَمَا أَنْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ بِوَكِيلٍ. And you're not going to be the one that is be responsible for the behavior, or at least for what this results into, their behavior and what it results to. At the end, you had invested in trying to make a difference, trying to educate, and trying to probably create a political force to bring about let's say, a shift within the society. But at the end, if they're insisting to continue in that way, you just put in the effort, regardless of whether you do become successful in making a change or not. Just recognize this one. Okay, now, I know, Ustaz Umayya, you had your hand up, dear. Go ahead. You wanted to say something before I continue with Tafseer al-Qurtubi. Oh dear, did I just take too long to allow you to ask your question or probably comment?
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
Yeah, I was busy with the next ayat because, mashallah, many ayat follow each other, and ayah number let's talk about al-Basira wal-Basair. It's number
104.
تدرك الأبصار.
Well, right
No,
there.
No, the one that said that لا تعمل الأبصار ومن
Right.
عليها. Yeah, it's 104. Is this the blinding of the القلوب, or only the vision itself? Because we know there is basar and basira. Basira
Right.
to the heart.
Okay.
In this ayah, it means the heart, the blinding, or the vision itself.
Okay, so it's basically talking about the heart. That's why in another ayah, فإنها لا تعمى الأبصار ولكن تعمى القلوب التي في الصدور.
Right.
When you look at, we could have a kafir and a mu'min. They're both, what do you see? I see a tree. And that one, what do you see? I see a tree. They're both agreeing that they are seeing a tree. But how we interpret what we see, basically, who created it? Why was it created? You would ask a kafir and he would say, well, it's matter in motion. All the different things, all the different things in soil and blah, 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 all these different things. And we'll basically get into talking about it from the angle of science and all of that. Okay. But for a believer, they'll look at it that, yes, it's a tree, but this was created as basically the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that made it into existence. And I see in this tree the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I see in this tree the rizq that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given us through this tree or through the skies and through all of that. So then the believer sees beyond the surface of, this is a tree. It basically, the soil and all of these different things are basically making this tree exist. And a Muslim or a mu'min sees beyond just matter in motion and sees that the one to bring about the motion is basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a mu'min sees Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power in everything that surrounds the believer. Whether we're speaking about the different things that you would see in terms of nature, or whether we are seeing the forces, even the social dynamic, or even economy. What do I mean by that? We would see, for example, a person doing haram things or a person harming other people. We would know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will one day basically retaliate, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish this person probably in their health or probably in their wealth. And therefore we would recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's justice, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power goes beyond matter in motion, and basically is working in subtle ways, whether in controlling our social dynamics or in controlling our psychological situation, in fact, as well. Okay, or controlling each and every single corner, finances, provisions, rizq, etc. And a Muslim basically sees with their heart. A Muslim sees with their heart. And when we say فَإِنَّهَا لَا تَعْمَى الْأَبْصَارِ, we're not talking about their eyes being blind, but ولكن تعمى القلوب التي في الصدور. That's basically talking about al-basira. That's talking about al-basira.
Yeah.
Did I answer that question, dear?
Yeah, thank you. And I have another question also.
Yep.
Yeah, in ayah 106, the benefit, can we take the benefit from this ayah that when it says اتبع ما أوحي إليك? Long time we taught us about the wahi to us is the meaning al-kitab, al-Quran, and wahi to the Prophet ﷺ is to send Jibril alayhi salam. So here اتبع ما أوحي إليك, as if talking to us, Allah asks us, don't lose your time and energy in talking to the mushrikeen, وأعرض عن المشركين. If we keep talking to the mushrikeen about hidayah and stuff like that, is it as we fell in the net of shaitan itself?
No. So when we see this ayah has a context. Okay. The ayah, in the context of this ayah, is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered the Prophet ﷺ in other ayat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him to warn basically his people, warn his relatives. In other ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders him to deliver the message to all mankind, etc. And so when you look at the context of this ayah, أَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, after you giving them the information, after you basically delivering the message, but if they insist, despite the fact that you had informed them, you had made it clear, but they are still insisting to reject what you had sent, then in that situation, you have to make a clear stance. Don't let that harm you psychologically or mentally, or even get to you to the point that you would lose energy and put in your energy where it's wasted. So
Yeah.
it has to be an amount of energy. So this is managing your energy. There's an amount of energy that you put in to make da'wah, and you put in the clarification, you put in probably the resources online, perhaps the words, perhaps maybe the different evidences, perhaps, hey, maybe I failed, I didn't do a good job in presenting the evidences, so I used maybe other resources. But then I realized that this person is not looking for evidence, but they're actually making this a personal issue and putting in their arrogance. Okay, so keep that one in mind. There are certain situations where it's an evidence that they are searching for. In other words, they're debating. You could see that this person is really debating evidence. I may have not used probably the best evidence in tackling their misconceptions or in tackling their issues, and perhaps someone else has a better way of putting things. Okay, someone else may have a better way of putting things, another scholar, and sometimes it's not a scholar, by the way. Okay, just keep that one in mind. Sometimes it's not a scholar, sometimes it's a way of making a good presentation. Okay, and I've had many situations where you could have a scholar, put in all these eloquent speeches, but then it just didn't occur to that person. But then when someone else within their society, within their age group or whatever, they made a better argument, they made a better presentation, they simplified it in a way to make it at least occur to the person. Okay, but there are other situations. So there's a shubuhat, and there is basically those misconceptions. Okay, and there's the other one, which is al-kibriya. Some might debate you not because you failed in presenting the evidence. Some might debate you because they just want to be superior. They just want to let their arrogance overcome you. It's not an issue of evidence. It's an issue of arrogance. And a mu'min or a Muslim, when you're doing da'wah, you really have to recognize the parameters of where this is at in order to put your energy in the right place.
Yeah, this is what I mean, but maybe my language not help me to ask clearly that this ayah is not only for the Prophet ﷺ, also for us for da'wah.
Oh, absolutely.
lose our-
العبرة بعموم اللفظ لا بخصوص السبب.
Okay.
العبرة
جزاك الله.
بعموم اللفظ. What does that mean? العبرة بعموم اللفظ. Like the theme in all the ayat is basically in the generalization or in the general statement that is basically laid out in the Quran and not necessarily in the context that it was revealed in. So here, وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, this isn't just directed at Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but that's also directed at us. In those situations when you have presented all the different evidences, but this person's arrogance is going and basically taking it as a personal issue, they just don't want to believe, or they just don't want to submit to the evidences, not because you didn't have enough data, but because they just wanted their arrogance. They just wanted to be superior, or they're probably benefiting from presenting these ideas. So they didn't want to lose a job. So they'll basically present themselves. And this is so common that we would say Muslims, believe it or not, it's Muslims. You would be in, let's say, a non-Muslim institution, and then the Muslims would be the ones that would want to be hypocritical. Why? Because they want to present themselves that they are in defense of liberalism, or in defense of, let's say, the kafir, I guess, narrative, and they want to present themselves that they are living and embracing that culture, that they are accommodating, that they are inclusive, and the list goes, tolerant, etc. And then they'll present themselves even far, let's say, even farther than the kuffar themselves. The kuffar themselves, they may sometimes want to stick to their own standards and say, well, yeah, I respect your vision, but then the Muslim, you'll see, unfortunately, that actually gets the Muslim out of Islam, by the way. They'll come in to attack you as a Muslim in defense of the standards that the kuffar are probably wanting to present. Now you've got, for example, without naming names, you have a Muslim that basically New York right now wants to come in and make prostitution as legal, wants to make prostitution as legal, and then you have, this is real. I mean, even in America, based on their standards, and even though, they're really going so far and distant away from their own standards, they basically consider as prostitution as illegal and inappropriate and basically unethical. But then you have a Muslim that wants to appear even more liberal than the liberals themselves and say, well, I'm going to ask for prostitution to make it legal and to make it as a business, as an ethical business that we have to support. And then you had non-Muslims come out and say, well, that's not even what your Quran says. Why are you here contradicting your own principles? Not only our principles, but even your own principles. And subhanAllah, that's what a hypocrite does. A hypocrite, you know, they just want to present something that it's not even based on their standards, but somebody else's standards, just because they want to be accepted. They want to appear that they are even, that they're included in, etc. SubhanAllah. So when we say وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, those that would basically live in shirk and they don't want to believe and they just want their arrogance to be basically superior, then you have to set your boundaries. This is extremely important. You have to set your boundaries. There are certain people, you just have to set your boundaries. You know what? That actually takes me to Surah Al-Najm. Let's go to Surah Al-Najm for a bit. Let's go find it. Oh, ya Allah, right on, man. Right there. You know, I just scroll down and boom, right there in front of me. Okay, let's say where's that ayah in Surah Al-Najm? Because where's that ayah in Surah Al-Najm? Didn't we? There is an ayah in Surah Al-Najm that actually says the same thing, wasn't it? In Surah Al-Najm, do I actually have that in praise? فأعرض عمن تولى عن ذكرنا ولم يرد إلا الحياة الدنيا. That's that ayah right there, right there. Let's look at it. Right here we go. This is the ayah right there. ذلك ما بلغهم من العلم إن ربك هو أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بمن اهتدى. That ayah is actually coming within the same thing. What is it saying? فأعرض عمن تولى عن ذكرنا. Then you just have to basically turn away from those that, let's take it. عمن تولى عن ذكرنا. You have to turn your back away from those that turn away from our remembrance. وَلَمْ يُرِدْ إِلَّا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. And they were only seeking this life. ذَلِكَ مَا بَلَغَهُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ. That's basically the amount of knowledge or surface knowledge that they would see this world in. But then it tells us the same thing. You just have to take that moment to distance yourself from those that had chosen their life to be just dedicated for this dunya. If their life is just dedicated for this dunya, then that's all they know about their purpose, about their life, about what they want of this dunya, they don't even see akhirah in perspective. So if they don't see the akhirah in perspective, and therefore tawalla an dhikrina, therefore they had basically turned their backs away from dhikrina. What is the dhikr? The dhikr is al-wahy. The dhikr is al-wahy. Al-wahy is basically the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent. Inna rabbaka huwa a'lam biman dhalla an sabili. Your Lord Almighty is in total knowledge of who basically is deviated away from his path. وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنِ اهْتَدَى. And he knows who basically had chosen guidance. وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ لِيَجْزِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسَاءُوا بِمَا عَمِلُوا وَيَجْزِيَ الَّذِينَ أَحْسَنُوا بِالْحُسْنَى. For the Lord Almighty is the one to be in control of the heavens and the earth. And the reason, of course, this is the lam al-sababiyya. The reason why he created it is in order to basically punish for those that had done wrong, basically, and for those that had done good, to reward them with al-husna. Al-husna, whether it's good or whether it's jannah. Okay. So now, what do we understand? What do we understand from all of this? We understand that when we talk about أعرض عمن تولى عن ذكرنا, that there are certain things that we have to recognize who we're dealing with, and sometimes we have to keep distance That's actually the same idea. When we talk about keeping distance, what does that remind us of? Keeping distance. Sometimes that's important. Where does that takes us to Surah Al-Muddathir? What's Surah Al-Insan, not Surah Al-Muddathir. Let's go to Surah Al-Insan and just see it for a second. What does in Surah Al-Insan, what does it say? Let's look at this one. فَاصْبِرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ وَلَا تُطِعْ. Let's see this ayah. فَاصْبِرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ وَلَا تُطِعْ مِنْهُمْ آثِمًا أَوْ كَفُورًا. What is فَاصْبِر? Wait, let's start from here. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ تَنزِيلًا. We had revealed the Quran onto you. So this is al-wahy. فَاصْبِر. Yet, you would have to put in an amount of sabr. What is a sabr? Sabr is patience. Sabr means there's going to be an amount of pain. But this amount of pain is to lead to maximized pleasure and, in fact, absolute pleasure in Jannah. So, in other words, fasbir, just be patient, put in your Lord Almighty's words into practice, and for the Lord Almighty's rule, you should submit. But at the same time, لا تطع منهم آثما أو كفورا. Don't obey those that are athim. What is an athim? An athim is basically the person that is a sinner. In other words, there are certain people that you really have to set these barriers, and you have to recognize who are you really surrounding yourself with. If we were to flip the ayah, what does that mean? If it's saying فَاصْبِرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ, in other words, وَلَا تُطِعْ مِنْهُمْ آثِمًا أَوْ كَفُورًا, then أطع if we're going to flip it, then you're going to obey basically al-athim. What's the opposite of athim? مطيع, obedient. Al-kafir, the opposite of that, is basically al-mu'min. So in other words, it's telling you that you have to set those boundaries away from people that commit sin. Just don't get engaged with these types of people. This shouldn't be included in your circle of friends. There are certain people you just have to unfollow. Certain people you just have to certainly hi bye. Don't even engage in any conversations. Hi bye, and that's all. That's the end of the conversation. And others, you basically have to, just like in Surah Al-Kahf. Others, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically tells us in Surah Al-Kahf, what was that ayah? What was that ayah in Surah Al-Kahf? Hold on.
What is
in Surah Al-Kahf, remember that?
Yeah, the meaning.
Well, let's go back to it, right? We're going to find it. This is important. Okay.
The subject.
Right. In Surah Al-Kahf, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically tells us, can't remember the ayah, we're going to find it. We can't forget it, right? Also comes within the same idea.
Speak about what?
The same idea.
What idea?
About basically surrounding yourself with the salihin. Remember that ayah? Who can tell us that ayah? We're gonna find it. Hold on. Where is it? It's basically at the top of the page. Oh, here we go. واصبر نفسك مع الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه ولا تعد عيناك عنهم تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا. Comes in with the same thing. Gotta be patient with those that would invoke their Lord Almighty throughout the day and throughout the night. They seek their Lord Almighty. And don't turn your eyes away from them. Because if you do, then you're just after dunya. But then, وَلَا تُطِعْ مَنْ أَغْفَلْنَا قَلْبَهُ عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا. Same idea. And don't follow those whose hearts are pacified away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because there's no end to how down and no end to how deep down or how deviated their own desires would take them. Because وَكَانَ أَمْرُهُ فُرُطًا. It's just going to go down and down and down. And at the end, you would basically have to put in these limits and how and who you deal with. Because if you don't put a limit, then you're going to find yourself just adapting to their culture, adapting to their mindset, adapting to their behavior. So what should I do? واذكر اسم ربك بكرة وأصيلا. I'm a very extroverted person, or I'm a very social person. Well, good for you, but you also have to remember واذكر اسم ربك بكرة وأصيلا. Put in that amount of dhikr throughout the night and throughout the day. How? Well, I want you, even the time during the night. You need a friend, don't you? Well, good. I want you to make that friend with your Lord Almighty. فَاسْجُدْ لَهُ وَسَبِّحْهُ لَيْلًا طَوِيلًا. You need to put in that sujood, because think of sujood as, it's that moment on Judgment Day when you are really wanting to beg for Jannah. Now is the time to beg for Jannah. Your sujood is that moment that, Ya Allah, I'm begging for Jannah. I'm basically putting my head down. I'm basically prostrating, begging you to give me Jannah, begging you to forgive me, begging you. This is that sujood. Sujood is the moment. فَاسْجُدْ لَهُ وَسَبِّحْهُ لَيْلًا طَوِيلًا. Do that sujood throughout the night. I'm gonna wake up because I believe in Jannah, because I believe in Allah, because I believe in Jannah, because I believe that al-jannatu haqq, al-akhirah haqq. I believe that all that is true. Ya Allah, I'm there begging you to accept me. That's why he said, for the disbelievers, إِنَّ هَؤُلَاءِ يُحِبُّونَ الْعَاجِلَةَ. They are just looking for immediate pleasure. Remember in the beginning, we talked about dhann and al-hawa. They're looking for immediate pleasure. They're looking for immediate benefit. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, they're just looking for immediate pleasure and immediate benefit. وَيَذَرُونَ وَرَاءَهُمْ يَوْمًا ثَقِيلًا. And they leave behind a day that is loaded with a lot of different accountability. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, نَحْنُ خَلَقْنَاهُمْ وَشَدَدْنَا أَسْرَهُمْ. We had created you. We created them, and we know what's motivating them to search for an immediate type of pleasure. But at the end, don't get dragged into their circle. Don't get dragged into that comfort zone. Just recognize, إِذَا شِئْنَا بَدَّلْنَا أَمْثَالَهُمْ تَبْدِيلًا. If we wanted to create a new creation that did not run after immediate pleasure and after immediate interest, which basically is a mirage that they're living in. So this is really just a reminder to help you see with your heart. فَمَنْ شَاءَ اتَّخَذَ إِلَى رَبِّهِ سَبِيلًا. And at the end, it's a choice that you have to make. You can choose to take a road in the path of your Lord Almighty, and then in the end, يُدْخِلُ مَن يَشَاءُ فِي رَحْمَتِهِ. The Lord Almighty you choose to basically submit to the Lord Almighty, then you're going to be included in the Lord Almighty's mercy. In other words, you choose now to submit to the Lord Almighty and who you want to be included within the orbit that is going to be basically putting in that influence. So what we're going to do right now, we're actually, at the end of our time, but inshallah, we're going to be doing our tafsir from al-Qurtubi in regards to وَهُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَأَخْرَجْنَا بِهِ نَبَاتَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. Okay, we're going to do that tomorrow. Inshallah, tomorrow is going to be Wednesday for me and Tuesday for you. Okay, so yeah, we've got some time, inshallah. Okay, and let's see what al-Qurtubi says. He said that there are 7 different topics and issues to discuss in that regards. I want to talk about those topics. What is he going to talk about, and why, and what details does he go into? So we're going to get into that, but I'm not going to go in super details about certain topics. You could see I didn't highlight everything, but at least I'm going to get to the major theme. That's why I highlighted these points. Hopefully, we won't stick too long on those points, but we're going to talk about some issues. I actually looked up Ibn al-Badri and see and basically wanted to highlight that one. We'll highlight it later, inshallah. But we're going to get to certain points about fiqh. Just be mindful that al-Qurtubi is a Maliki scholar and basically a fiqh expert. So whenever you see things that may be something that we could use to derive fiqh, al-Qurtubi is not going to skip it. He's really going to talk about it, and he's going to say something in regards to that. So stay tuned for tomorrow. Is there even any fiqh to learn from an ayah that's just talking about giving us this information about the creation of life and different things in nature? How did they even derive a ruling from this ayah? Stay tuned for tomorrow to learn more about how al-fuqaha go beyond the surface of the ayat. If there are any questions or even comments, I'd love to hear it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, in the ayah of Surah Al-Kahf, when you said about واصبر نفسك مع الذين يدعون ربهم ولا تعد عيناك عنهم. إذن تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا. Does it mean we can combine the situation of Abdullah ibn Maktoum when he came to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم أما من استغنى, then he said ولا تطع من أغفلنا قلبه. Does it can we combine it with أما من استغنى فأنت له تصدى? يعني it like to complete the meaning of what you discussed about don't lose our energy with the talking with the mushrikeen.
Well, I mean, yes, of course.
Is there meaning here between
right, but I would say those are two different circumstances, two different areas.
Yeah. But the focusing on the topic itself, that don't lose
right.
it.
So let me give you the context of this ayah. Okay, the context of واصبر نفسك مع الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه, that was something similar to what happened in Surah Abasa, but it was not Abdullah ibn Maktoum. It was actually Ammar ibn Yasir, it was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, it was Mus'ab ibn Umair, it was a couple, and well, not Mus'ab ibn Umair, but it was Suhaib, actually, Suhaib al-Rumi. So you had a couple Sahaba that one of them, we had another narration that couldn't remember which one of those. They were 4 Sahaba or 5 or 6 different narrations, okay? Yet, the ones to basically come to the Prophet ﷺ, they were asking for some questions, but then the Prophet ﷺ, when they had come to him, these chieftains, they said, we don't feel comfortable sitting with these poor people. Basically, we would love to join and actually learn and ask questions, but we're at a different level. In other words, we're a different class. And Ammar ibn Yasir, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Suhaib al-Rumi, those were ex-slaves, or at least they were from the lower class. We don't want to be included in the lower class. We want to be an upper class. We want to be given somewhat of, let's say, an appreciation, somewhat of, I guess, this type of acknowledgement that we would not be included in the lower class groups. So that's why they're requesting, can you let them sit isolated? In other words, segregate us from them. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed the ayah, because the Prophet ﷺ did attempt to segregate them just to give some room for a possibility of probably bring their hearts to Islam. So that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ. You need to be patient. Those are the people that you really want to invest in the most. Who are those? Well, they may seem lower class to their standards, but in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala standards, those are actually the people that deserve the most of your attention, the most of your respect, and the most of your embracement. So that's why it said, وَلَا تُطِعْ مَنْ أَغْفَلْنَا قَلْبَهُ عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا. Don't follow who his heart was pacified away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's remembrance.
With arrogance also.
It's right. It's redirecting the way that you would consider one classification in terms of social classification, or even the way that you would regard certain groups as being important or not important, superior, inferior, whatever it is that you would want to use. In Islam is, in the Quran is basically teaching you that there's a certain standard, which is the standard based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's classification. Same thing when you look at in a different story. In other words, in Surah عبس وتولى أن جاءه الأعمى وما يدريك لعله يزكى. And when you look at the context, it was with Abdullah ibn Maktoum. So yes, certainly came with a different figure, but the story is, I guess, coming in with the same stance, which is looking at Abdullah ibn Maktoum at that moment coming to ask a question, and this question that he was coming in to ask when the Prophet was already busy with these chieftains, and I guess, debating with them, trying to get their hearts closer to Islam. And Abdullah ibn Maktoum could have delayed his question, but he didn't delay his question. He insisted on asking about certain things about tazkiyah, certain things about that. And the Prophet was certainly pacified trying to answer someone else's question, but the Prophet gave this grin. Okay, that's when the ayah said, "Abasa wa tawalla." You gave a grin, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was basically telling the Prophet that such a grin that you had given, your discomfort, in which certainly Ibn Maktoum did not say your grin, did not say your facial expression, because he was completely blind to see that you were not comfortable with his approach at that moment.
And he is blind, and how he know that the face of the Prophet ﷺ changed?
Right. He didn't see any of that. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, revealed the ayah that no, that was not appropriate for you as a prophet to consider even a facial expression, even an internal probably expression, or probably an internal feeling in that moment. It's not appropriate for you as a prophet, because you have to recognize that there is this person that requires more of your attention because of the good intention that they had come with.
It could happen in our time.
What was that?
Could happen in our time, when some people, some group that working on da'wah, and they sitting with the high classes people, and when normal one ask them something, they reject his situation, or to be with this group. فيها breaking heart.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, I've dealt with people that are very upper class and people that are very low class. And what I mean by low class, I mean financially or economically, at least. And I'll tell you, the people that are usually on the poorer end, okay? On the poorer end, they tend to be sincere, more transparent, and very simple. In their simplicity is really speaking of a lot of values, by the way. The upper class, I've had a lot of people that were in the very upper class, really upper class, But subhanallah, upper class can sometimes blind us. And there's a lot of fakeness. We're trying to display in being an upper class, trying to display power, trying to display a certain type of what is the word that I could use? I would say a mask. We're trying to put the upper class, trying to put a mask, and even though they can afford it, okay, but then they'll wear certain clothes, their homes, and their even when they talk about their life, it's always trying to present themselves as basically in control of everything, trying to present themselves as even richer even though they're rich, but trying to present themselves even richer. It's always about giving the others the impression and trying to impress others. It's that I guess that force that is within them, trying to impress others. And are they really impressed? They themselves are not impressed, but they're lacking confidence and they're waiting for others' affirmation to confirm that they are satisfied. So they try to appear at a certain level of power, empowerment, of having success, etc., and trying to expose themselves to appear that they are that they're in these areas of success in order to get another type of empowerment by making others accept them, that yes, these people are in place of power. It's usually power that even these rich people are trying to get to. It's power even within people's hearts. So they'll start talking about how their children succeeded in getting to this university or that university, or they bought this house, it's beautiful, this is how much it costs, and this is what we managed to get, etc. It's always trying to get into making others confirm and give that affirmation that yes, you are in power, you are strong, you are this, but because they themselves doubt their power. Yet when you live with the lower class, the poor people, they're not actually, they definitely recognize they're not in power because they don't even have the money to prove their power. Okay, so
But
they
they
live,
have Sultan al-Iman wal-Alam,
they live the value. They live the value. They live the value of being hospitable, even though where they don't have the money. I went into these homes where they didn't even have anything to serve you. They're nothing, literally nothing to serve you, not even the cheapest kind of juice or drink or whatever it is.
like
Not even the cheapest kind, which was really nothing but probably a couple colors and probably some sugar or who knows, glucose syrup, whatever it's called, and all of that, and just mixed with water. They didn't even have any money to that. I've been into homes, they don't even have a bathroom. They would do their nature and just any, those
like Ahl Sufa,
cans.
nothing.
Yeah, they would have these cans, the pickle cans, and that's basically their bathroom. And then they would do their business there, and then they would just dig a hole in the ground and just dump it there. They didn't even have any bathrooms. And you would see these people are trying to present you with the most beautiful happiness, with the most beautiful transparency, and whatever they could give you, they'll give you and present to you what they themselves don't even have. Whatever, they'll probably have maybe something that they had served or probably kept maybe for a very special moment for themselves, but because you came in, they're willing to sacrifice what they had really kept for a special moment for themselves just to present it to you. That's the most beautiful respect. And you probably were like, that you would go to their home and they'll probably give you maybe cake and probably give you chocolates and all of that. But then you realize that they would only have that reserved for a very special moment, and you are the special moment. And you didn't even know. You thought that that was something that was available. They didn't tell you that it wasn't actually available. But
Does it hadith or Qudusi or
يحسبهم
hadith
الجاهل
nabawi?
أغنياء من التعفف.
Yeah. It's about the meaning of it. It's كم من مشهور مغبون عند أهل الأرض مشهور عند أهل السماء. Is it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Good
don't
people.
really know the level of authenticity in that hadith, but it is actually true. You can see people that may be forgotten, people that people do not usually recognize, but then the angels, the Ahl al-Sama, all those, the dwellers of the heavens, they basically know this person. You could, and that's why it's really important to connect with these people that usually people don't give them attention. And they're just this poor person that's probably, doing their dhikr in this hut, maybe in a place in Africa. No one knows about this person. She's just, all she does is just basically do her qira'at Quran and just dhikr. You go into her home, she might have, probably a yellow,
ولو أقسم
gallon.
الله لأبر.
Right. It's just a yellow old gallon that she probably have had for, I don't know, 13 years, or the same yellow gallon. She basically fills it with water and food. She might have, some old bread and probably rotten even, and that's what she feeds on, just a couple things. And that's basically what she has. Doesn't have anything. But these could be the people to make it to Jannah.
They don't pay attention to the fania.
Absolutely. And I had seen some people, and in Palestine and in Jordan, those are the places that I had at least went to see some people in al-Mukhayyamat, those refugee camps, and went to these refugee camps and seen the most beautiful hearted and soft hearted people. I'm not saying everyone, but just a lesson to learn. And at the same time, been into these really rich places, and you're like, oh, okay. I personally love those simple people very, very much.
Yeah, the first people enter Jannah.
There is a hadith actually in Sahih Muslim.
Right.
That the ones to race and beat others to Jannah are basically the poor people.
Yeah.
They would be the ones to enter Jannah first. Why? Because they don't have a lot to be questioned about.
And there is hadith about the most people in hellfire, the aghniya, rich.
Absolutely. Allah al-Musta'an. So this is it, everybody. Inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow. Stay tuned, because we've got a lot to discuss. Every single time we always say we have a lot to discuss. So hopefully, inshallah, subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.